to like and subscribe for more videos like this.
Our continuation of How It Works begins now. This is a continuation of the ProjectGutenberg.org book, How It Works, by Archibald Williams, that covers dealing in simple language with steam, electricity, light, heat, sound, hydraulics, optics, etc., and with their applications to apparatus in common use. Hopefully this is boring enough to help you relax and unwind. Enjoy the trains and the reading. Here we go. Other types of boilers. For small stationary land engines, the vertical boiler is much used. In Figure 8, we have three forms of this type: A and B with cross water tubes, C with vertical fire tubes. The furnace in every case is surrounded by water and fed through a door at one side. The Lancashire boiler is of large size. It has a cylindrical shell measuring up to 30 feet in length and 7 feet in diameter, traversed from end to end by two large flues, in the rear part of which are situated the furnaces. The boiler is fixed on a seating of fire bricks so built up as to form three flues, A and BB, shown in cross-section in Figure 9. The furnace gases, after leaving the two furnace flues, are deflected downward into the channel, by which they pass underneath the boiler to a point almost under the furnace, where they divide right and left and travel through cross passages into the side channels, to be led along the boiler's flanks to the chimney exit. By this arrangement, the effective heating surface is greatly increased, and the passages being large, naturally draft generally suffices to make proper combustion. The Lancashire boiler is much used in factories and in a modified form on ships, since it is a steady steamer and is easily kept in order. In marine boilers of cylindrical shape, cross-water tubes and fire tubes are often employed to increase the heat surface. Return tubes are also led through the water to the funnels, situated at the same end as the furnace. We may now turn our attention to aids in combustion. Aids in combustion. We may now turn our attention more particularly to the chemical process called combustion, upon which a boiler depends for its heat. Ordinary steam coal contains about 85% of carbon, 7% of oxygen, and 4% of hydrogen, besides traces of nitrogen and sulfur and a small incombustible residue. When the coal burns, the nitrogen is released and passes away without combining with any of the other elements. The sulfur unites with hydrogen and forms sulfretted hydrogen, also named sulfurous acid, which is injurious to steel plates and is largely responsible for the decay of tubes and funnels. More of the hydrogen unites with the oxygen as steam. The most important element in coal is the carbon, known chemically by the symbol C. Its combination with oxygen, called combustion, is the act which heats the boiler. Only when the carbon present has combined with the greatest possible amount of oxygen that it will take into partnership is the combustion complete and the full heat valve, fixed by scientific experiment at 14,500 thermal units per pound of carbon, developed. Now carbon may unite with oxygen, atom for atom, and form carbon monoxide, or in the proportion of 1 atom of carbon to 2 of oxygen and form carbon dioxide. The former gas is combustible, that is, will admit another atom of carbon to the molecule, but the latter is saturated with oxygen and will not burn, or to put it otherwise, is the product of perfect combustion. A properly designed furnace supplied with a due amount of air will cause nearly all the carbon in the coal burnt to combine with the full amount of oxygen. On the other hand, if the oxygen supply is inefficient, CO as well as CO2 will form, and there will be a heat loss, equal in extreme cases to 2/3 of the whole. It is therefore necessary that a furnace which has to eat up fuel at a great pace should be artificially fed with air in the proportion of from 12 to 20 pounds of air for every pound of fuel. There are two methods of creating a violent draft through the furnace. The first is the forced draft, very simply exemplified by the ordinary bellows used in every house. On a ship, the principle is developed as follows. The boilers are situated in a compartment or compartments, having no communication with the outer air, except for the passage down, which is air forced by powerful fans at a pressure considerably greater than that of the atmosphere. There is only one way out, namely through the furnace and tubes or gasways of the boiler and the funnel. So through these it rushes, raising the fuel to white heat. As may easily be imagined, the temperature of a stockade, especially in the tropics, is far from pleasant. In the Red Sea, the thermometer sometimes rises to 170 degrees Fahrenheit or more, and the poor stokers have a very bad time of it. The second system is that of the induced draft. Here, air is sucked through the furnace by creating a vacuum in the funnel and in a chamber opening into it. Turning to Figure 6, we see a pipe through which the exhaust steam from the locomotive cylinders is shot upwards into the funnel, in which, and in the smoke box beneath it, a strong vacuum is formed while the engine is running. Now, nature abhors a vacuum, so air will get into the smoke box if there be a way open. There is, through the air doors at the bottom of the furnace itself, and the fire tubes, and on the way oxygen combines with the carbon of the fuel to form carbon dioxide. The power of the draft is so great that, as one often notices when a train passes during the night, red-hot cinders plucked from the firebox and dragged through the tubes are hurled far into the air. It might be mentioned in parentheses that the so-called smoke, which pours from the funnel of a moving engine, is mainly condensed steam. A steamship, on the other hand, belches smoke only from its funnels, as a fresh water is far too precious to waste as steam. We shall refer to this later on. Boiler fittings. The most important fittings on a boiler are, number 1, the safety valve, number 2, the water gauge, number 3, the steam gauge, and number 4, the mechanisms for feeding it with water. The safety valve. Professor Thurston, an eminent authority on the steam engine, has estimated that a plain cylindrical boiler carrying 100 pounds pressure to the square inch contains sufficient stored energy to protect it in the air a vertical distance of 3.5 miles. In the case of a Lancashire boiler, at equal pressure, the distance would be 2.5 miles. Of a locomotive boiler at 125 pounds, 1.5 miles. Of a steam tubular boiler at 75 pounds, 1 mile. According to the same writer, a cube of heated water under a pressure from 60 to 70 pounds per square inch has about the same energy as 1 pound of gunpowder. Steam is a good servant, but a terrible master. It must be kept under strict control. However strong a boiler may be, it will burst if the steam pressure in it is raised to a certain point, and some device must therefore be fitted on it with which to give the steam free egress before that point is reached. A device of that kind is called a safety valve. It usually blows off at less than half the greatest pressure that the boiler has been proved by experiment to be capable of withstanding. In principle, the safety valve denotes an orifice closed by an accurately fitting plug, which is pressed against its seat on the boiler top by a weighted lever or a spring. As soon as the steam pressure on the face of the plug exceeds the counteracting force of the weight or spring, the plug rises and steam escapes until equilibrium of the opposing forces is restored. On stationary engines, a lever safety valve is commonly employed. The blowing off point can be varied by shifting the weight along the arm as to give it greater or less leverage. On locomotive and marine boilers, where shocks and movements have to be reckoned with, weights are replaced by springs, set to a certain tension, and locked up so that they cannot be tampered with. Boilers are tested by filling the boilers quite full, and 1, by heating the water, which expands slightly but with great pressure, and 2, by forcing in addition water with a powerful pump. Either case, a rupture would not be attended by an explosion, as water is very inelastic. The days when an engineer could sit on the valves, that is, screw them down to obtain greater pressure, are now past, and with them a considerable proportion of the dangers of high-pressure steam. The Factory Act of 1895, enforced throughout the British Isles, provides that every boiler for generating steam in a factory or workshop where the Act applies must have a proper safety valve, steam gauge, and a water gauge, and that boilers and fittings must be examined by competent persons at least once in every 14 months. Neglect of these provisions renders the owner of a boiler liable to heavy penalties if an explosion occurs. One of the most disastrous explosions on record took place at the Redcar Iron Works, Yorkshire, in June 1895. In this case, 12 out of 15 boilers ranged side by side burst, through one proving too weak for its work. The flying fragments of this boiler, striking the sides of other boilers, exploded them, and so the damage was transmitted down the line. 20 men were killed and injured, while masses of metal, weighing several tons each, were hauled 250 yards and caused widespread damage. The following is taken from a journal dated December 22, 1895. Providence, Rhode Island. A recent prophecy that December 16th and 24th in store has seriously affected the Christmas trade. Shoppers are incredibly happy and smart prices. Our boilers are being used. Lifts running electrically. Our stores have had their boilers inspected. So we will pick up our next installment of this fascinating how it works. The